I'm Nicole Glenn, the CEO and founder of Candor Expedite, and this is our first discussion that we're having, and we're labeling coffee and candor. So, wanted to welcome the first guest, someone who's recently joined our organization, Lance Roberts. Welcome, Lance, on this awesome chat we're going to have.
Thank you, Nicole. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I wanted you to come on here and just kind of give some insight to everybody. Like, who are you? What have you done? And I want to say you're a veteran of the industry, which I'll let you get to, but tell everybody what it is that you've done that's brought magic to different organizations.
Yeah, so it's a funny story. So I started out warehousing, and then decided there was no growth in warehousing, so I wanted to try something else. So I got a job at Roadway in the '90s and started on the dock. And I had a mentor tell me once that if you wanted to be successful in this industry, you had to sit in every chair to understand what every person does to effectively manage that business. I took this challenge literally, so I literally came in on my days off and sat in every single chair, and I felt like that's been the recipe of the rest of my career. Over the last 30 years, I mean, I've literally gone into companies, learned everything I could, and so as my career started taking off, I also had some ups and downs, and I learned from them. So one of the impactful things was when I was in the brokerage industry, I saw the good, the bad, and the ugly, and I kind of had my Jerry Maguire moment where I said, I don't want to be like this. I want to be different. And unfortunately, I got wrapped into some companies that said they were one way and they weren't. So it kind of led my career down a different path. And finally, one day, I just said, I'm really tired of the the companies that say they're one thing and do something totally different. They don't live the values that they preach. So I started a consulting company 7 years ago, which is actually how you and I met. You were my first call on my consulting. So that's
You
kind of
were you were one of my first on LinkedIn when I did I guess it's a recommendation of somebody. I want to go check and see if it's still there because I wrote it back in I think it was 2016 when we had
yeah.
our first conversation. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And it was funny because when you first called, I could tell you there was something about the way you talked about the industry, your knowledge and your passion for doing the right things right. See, that's what separates, I think, you from a lot of people in the industry. And that's, one of the things forward. I'm a big believer in people, things happen for a reason. You go through experiences and trials. But one of the interesting things that I found was that I saw so many people talk the talk, but not walk the walk. And so when you and I met in 2016, I was like, oh, I got to keep an eye on her. She sounds like she might be going somewhere. And so it was funny to see you a year later. I took over and did a transformation of a trucking company in Texas. And a year later, I was kind of watching around, and all of a sudden you popped up under Candor. So it was kind of interesting to see you show up and actually get, hang your own shingle out.
Yeah. So when we were talking, I was trying to work for a company and build my first, I guess you could say, brokerage, even though I'd already worked at one and ran one. So it was a really interesting time to go through and start one from scratch. And it taught me a lot about taking that entrepreneurial leap, that I was ready by doing that. So you were a part of that little seed planting that I needed to jumpstart and do something on my own. So again, as I keep saying, I'm elated that you're here and you're with us. But I do want to understand, like, what was it about Candor that was appealing to you? When now, fast forward time, right? There's been a lot of time, uh, many years, and here it is, and it opened up. And what was it about the company that was different to you?
Again, kind of keeping my eye on Candor over the last 7 years. It's always interesting because I've done close to 30, 40 startups, turnarounds, M&A deals over my career in consulting. So it's always interesting, but you keep an eye on a few companies that you see as they're doing the right things right. They're leading the right foot forward. They're, practicing what they preach mentality, and you just kind of keep an eye on them. And so it was interesting because I started seeing you take off on LinkedIn. I started seeing the podcast, and I started seeing your name buzz around. So, when you run across customers that, do business with you, it's always interesting to kind of get their take. And everybody that I kind of heard from, saw from, they all said the same thing. That Candor was really walking the walk, not just talking the talk. And, in today's climate, in 2019, there was 900 trucking companies that went out of business. And those were kind of my heydays of doing turnarounds and M&As. And, you see a lot of people who have a lot of great business minds. Unfortunately, they kind of get in their own way. And I think when I started watching Candor a little closer the last year and a half, I started noticing that you were not trying to do something that you didn't understand. You were always asking for help. You were not afraid to say, hey, this is not my wheelhouse. How do I do it better? How do we be better for our customers? And I think that the ability to not be one of those people that says, oh, I know everything, it's kind of refreshing because you're not afraid to ask questions and get in the middle, which to me, fresh eyes sometimes open up great opportunities that nobody else can do because, the prideful come in and they just put their chest out. I know everything and they've got a solution for everything. Sometimes that gets in their own way of finding the real solution for a customer. And sometimes our customers just want a fresh view. They want a fresh take. Everybody's been doing the same thing for the last 20 years. So, it's fresh when you have somebody that comes in and says, tell me more. Let's unravel this. Let's peel back the onion and let's dive in and figure out a real way to solve this problem. Not just come in and say, well, this is how we did it last year. Last year's technology doesn't work this year, and things that happened 2 years ago, 5 years ago aren't always what's going to work tomorrow. So we have to keep reinventing ourselves. And I think it's that fresh eyes that give us the ability. And watching Candor always have fresh eyes looking at everything as, why can't we do that? Why can't we fix that? Why can't we make that better than it was yesterday? I think that's what intrigued me. And then getting to know some of your team members. When you and I first started talking and interviewing, your core values, it's interesting because every single person that I met with seems to live it and breathe it. It's not just something that you hang on the wall and say, here's our values, or it's on our website. You actually feel it and see it at the team level. So that to me is very refreshing because a lot of companies say they're cultural and then they can't live it, they can't preach it. And I have some experiences at other companies where, their culture definitely is not what the leaders live.
Right. No, I understand that. And you're right. It does radiate through everything and everybody. And one of the spots of core values and really mission statements, I think people project what they want to be instead of who they are. And so going through those core values, no one just sat down, or myself just sat down and wrote them down and said, hey, this is who we are. It was serious discussions on who do we reflect and who do we want to continue to showcase in values. And it really has made a huge impact on the organization. And as you know, we live through that even with recognizing people consistently. We're touching those core values every single day. And I think that is very, very important because it helps you stay humble and stay true to who you are, regardless if you have, a 2020 year or 2021 year when things are rocking. Even when things are tough, those same core values can reflect upon how the industry is changing, innovation, and putting yourself, out there with that same mindset consistently. So what do you see happening here in the future with stepping into this organization? Obviously, you're bringing a whole new set of thoughts and open eyes, right, to talking through things and peeling back layers and changing and making us even stronger. But what do you see happening, one in the industry. I always love to understand what people see happening going forward in the industry in the next, say, 6 months. And then what do you see changing here for the company?
I think history repeats itself in a lot of ways. So, coming in here, watching the industry, right? So I was in the LTL space and I watched the industry sway from regionalized business to national business because basically we had the 2000, the dot-com bust, right? Well, everybody went from regionalized business into national business. So truckload took off, LTL declined. In my opinion, that's kind of how things kind of started moving, which made sense for me to move into the brokerage world and get into truckload. And then you started seeing specializations of stuff. And then, fast forward 2008, the economy collapses, things changed, people stayed in the truckload, but then all of a sudden you started seeing a little bit of the e-commerce start popping up in the mid 2000s, right? So as all of a sudden that changed, you start seeing a transition, and you get into things like expedite and hot shots. And the interesting part is that what we used to do in truckload, well, people aren't shipping full truckloads, so they started shipping smaller volumes, and they still needed to get there. Well, you don't want to wait until you have a full truckload. You don't want to pay LTL and some of those prices. So how do you solve those problems? Continuously changes and it evolves. And that's the thing. While we went from regional to national, we're going back to regional. And as you go to regional shipping, then all of a sudden you have these expedited, right? We have the Amazon effect. We have certain things in the industry that are changing, that COVID hits, and you have e-commerce taking off. Well, when e-commerce takes off, nobody shops at the mall anymore. Nobody shops at the major stores. And while they do, they're not shopping as much. So they're getting it online cheaper and quicker, but somebody needs to deliver it to their house. Somebody needs to install it. Somebody needs to take care of it because you don't want to scratch your floors. And, so all of these needs start coming out. And it's interesting to watch like companies like Candor, how they evolve into those spaces because the needs change, and that's where companies have to be nimble and have to be flexible. And I know a lot of companies today are struggling with that because for them it's truckload or LTL, and you only have one or two options, and not every one or two options is going to fit everything. So that's where I see the industry evolving is, as we kind of keep moving that e-commerce piece, you're going to see more. How do I get this into my house? How do I get this into my office? How do I get this here? And how do I get it there next day, same day? Because everybody wants that Amazon shipment tomorrow or Walmart shipment or Target, right? They want these key players to deliver now. They want it now. And so, and I want it set up. I don't want to build a dresser or build a equipment machine. I want it set up in my house and ready to go. So I think that the world is changing for us. And I think as we evolve as a company, I see the opportunities where we have to evolve with it, and we have to present things that, a couple of years ago, you said the word expedite and everybody kind of freaked out. It was like this, oh, that's super expensive. That's only when, my line's down. And now that we're seeing that opportunity, we can step into that and say, it's not a dirty secret anymore. It's actually something you can budget. It's something that you can work into your cadence of when you don't have a full truckload, when you need one or two pallets, when you need just a small shipment, or you need a white glove. We have options. We have different solutions. We just need to understand what you need and how you need it, and then we can build something around that. And I think that's the evolution I see in the industry, and I think that's where Candor is leading the way right now.
And you said something that just radiates with me because I'm talking about this a lot, which is having an expedited strategy. You said it, like this dirty little secret. We have a report too that we could share for anyone who's watching this episode. We'll share as a link. But in this report, we're talking about how shippers can really benefit from having this expedited strategy. I like to call it the non-expedite, which makes everyone's head kind of go, spin a little bit. But with that is stepping into a space and then really having that consultative approach to look at data and to understand what are some tripwires that take place within a supply chain that makes sense to take a shipment or a set of shipments and create milk runs that can do
Yeah.
multiple deliveries in this regional distribution concept that you had said that's continually growing. And it's almost like expedite needs another word
Yeah.
for it, for these types of things. Because really what it is tailoring solutions and tailoring equipment to the needs of the shipment, which also helps with sustainability. I mean, how many times in your past have you gotten a shipment or your team's gotten a shipment and it's one or three skids and it's in a tractor trailer and it's going, 1,200 miles. And we're talking about capacity problems. We're talking about not having enough drivers. We're talking about empty miles. We're talking about wasted space and waste in general.
Yeah.
And to me, it's so exciting and refreshing to look at these customized solutions for supply chains across the country.
Well, and you think about it too, it's always interesting when you start looking at the pieces of the puzzle, because yes, expedite is expensive if you wait till the lines shut down. That's
Right.
when people are like, okay, just get it here, right? And if you plan a little bit, you can have that kind of, I like to say it's like my coffee subscription. I'm a coffee connoisseur, so it's one of those things though that I have to have my coffee show up every 3-4 weeks, so that way I have a replenishment, right? So that way I get my coffee when I need it. And if you think about it that way, is if you're constantly subscribing to it, it's not as expensive because it's pre-planned. And you're not waiting till the line shuts down. So, you're not waiting till a full truckload is built, or you're not waiting until the cost gets right into your budget. If you plan it properly and you execute it properly, you can expedite freight and keep the cost down. And that's, I think, the power of the industry today, is that we have those solutions and we have those opportunities, and everybody's waiting for the line to shut down.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we see it often. And I still love helping people when they're in that space, because there are times when things straight up just go wrong. This is logistics. Nothing is perfect. So having that contingency plan, which I'm going to ask you about here in a second, is just critical. So in your mind, so now we're talking about, we have this expedited strategy, which I'm going to want to ask you another question on in a second. But when we're talking about the importance I'm a shipper, let's say, and I go about my business, and as we keep seeing, things are changing. Potential companies that I utilize every day as a shipper could be going out of business. Big box brokers are struggling. Big box brokers are going out of business, some of them. What, in your mind, is the best advice for a shipper to have a contingency plan?
I think due diligence is always a key to doing business. Just because, like you mentioned, there is big brokers, big companies going out of business. I mean, 2019 was a scary year for a lot of people. I mean, we came off of 2018 with the economy just booming, trucking was flying, rates were going through the roof, and I consulted for a couple of major shippers during that time, and help them get in the right position so they could sustain it going into 2019. And of course, the market turned in 2019, which made it more favorable. But you have to plan for the worst and hope for the best, right? And I think that's the key, is getting to understand your needs and getting the right partnerships, right? It's not always being the biggest and the baddest, and it's not always being the smallest and most nichey. It's understanding your true partnership and the relationships, and is that partner willing to go the extra mile for you, and make sure that they're there 24/7. Do they have your back when things do come off the rails? Because things are, I mean, in logistics, like you said, we can't plan that there was going to be 100 ships off the coast of California, but there was. And as soon as those ships are coming in, people wanted that merchandise like that. How do you recover from that? What are your backup plans? And that's the thing, is I think today companies need to have the right partnerships to understand who the key players are. What is your team that you're partnered with? What are their capabilities? And making sure you have all those contingency plans thought through. It's just what's the worst that could happen to me? And how do I plan around it? Like a risk strategy for logistics. we do risk assessments in IT all the time, and I think people should do risk assessments in logistics. Like, if this product doesn't get to my delivery or to my customer, what happens? I heard a story recently of somebody needing a part expedited, or it was going to cost the customer $1 million because basically the client could return the product that they purchased because they didn't have this one part within a certain time frame. I mean, the $1 million swing is a big thing. So what's a $1,500 shipment or whatever? Had they prepared for it, that wouldn't have been an issue. So I just think contingency planning and due diligence of the partners you work with is a big key in today's market.
So with that too, and your ideas of having an expedited and a non-expedited strategy, holy tongue twister. What do you think companies can do to really be more successful alongside of a contingency plan and partnerships? Like, what are the other things that make the biggest impact as you've worked on the helping the shipper side that you've seen in changing a supply chain?
I think a lot of people, when we're in a down economy, everybody wants to play the market, right? Everybody wants to play the game of the rates, beat it down. And I think you have to look at the long play. We're only going to be in this down market like every other market. Again, the pendulum swings both ways. We just happen to be on the verge of going back the other way. And when we do go back the other way, how far and how fast? I mean, a lot of people thought 2019, market's going in our favor, we're going to be fine. And then 2020, everything fell off the cliff. And then all of a sudden it turned and went the opposite way, and it went up faster than anybody could, recover. And then that sustained for 2 years. So that's my fear, is that while we're in this down period, people are not, they're looking at the bottom line. And I get it. We all got to watch the bottom line because of inflation and cost. But we need to start planning for the next phase, right? The next quarter could turn. Things could constrain a little bit. And when they do, what is your backup plan? There's talk of strikes, there's talk of bankruptcies more in the industry, and you have to look at what is your contingent plans. And I think that the strategy needs to be bringing in your partners like Candor and bring them into the office and sit down and say, how do we work this together? How do we protect our bottom line? How do we work this together? I think that partnership is really big, and I think that relationship is key in the next couple of years, because without it, again, you're going to live and die on the market. But, in a couple of months or a couple of years, you could really, shippers are going to hurt because the market could go back the other way.
I agree with you. I did want to ask you one last question, Lance. Is there any sneak peeks or anything exciting that we could throw out to potential and current clients on what we're doing over here and where we're headed at Candor?
I think one of the exciting things that's coming is there's kind of as you and I first spoke, there's kind of that unicorn in the industry, the refrigerated, small shipment issues that are lingering in the issues. The more e-commerce is taken off, we have people delivering right to our homes of food and food and groceries and stuff like that. We have home deliveries of dinner, lunch, whatever. But as things continuously evolve, it's getting those small shipments from point A to point B. And what's that solution? And I think there is some stuff coming down the pike that, I don't want to get too deep into it, but I do think that Candor has an option coming that, in another segment, maybe we could go over it.
For sure. But just exciting things happening here.
Absolutely. I think there is something small coming in the future that could be very big.
Yeah. And that's the thing that I love about this industry, is consistently putting yourself in different situations to learn and evolve and bring solutions to a customers and industry, and changing the way that, I don't know, potentially millions of shipments could ship, and saving money and bringing efficiency. So it's just very exciting. And you said a couple of key points of, people stepping into the space and just being, say, an LTL company or a full truckload provider. I go to conference all the time and I meet individuals and I'm like, tell me about you. And they're like, I'm a full truckload broker. And I'm going, what else? What else? Where value, strengths, like what are those?
Yeah.
And it's not there. And so to have a company that's focused on the evolution of our customers' needs with some great people behind us is very exciting. And I'm very happy to have you here with us on this just thrilling journey. I mean, it's not all sunshine and rainbows, logistics, life, business never is, but having these concepts and building something out is very, very exciting. So Lance, I want to thank you for coming on our first Coffee and Candor. Thanks for all the truth telling that you threw out today, and we'll have to have another session here soon.
Absolutely. Very excited. Thank you for having me.